we've been studying, I think, what I've been calling the sort of a ramp up of sports experience for this generation of kids, the generation of the 90s and the aughts, the generation that you've grown up in. And we've been hearing about the intensification of the sport experience, new sports, new kinds of intensity in a variety of sports. So I think as that's happened, we've also had an intensification in coaching. Coaches are much more knowledgeable now, many more coaches working full-time, both within traditional school systems like high schools and middle schools and also colleges, but also outside of the traditional school programs and all sorts of specialty programs. So we want to hear about how these coaches got themselves trained. First of all, I guess how they got themselves interested in coaching, why they got into it, their career path, how they trained themselves, and then also I think in a second round of questions we want to hear a little bit about why they stay in it, why this is a good fit for them in terms of career. So without that too much more, let me introduce the panel from my far right coming this way, and then we'll have Josh speak first. But you all know Pete Davila, a defensive specialist and coach for Otterbein. Did his undergraduate work at Youngstown State, was a linebacker and defensive back there, and has taught all over the U.S., especially taught in high schools, has done a little bit of coaching at the NFL level, and has now taught at 2 or 3 different colleges. Dee Knoblauch teaches in our education department. I think she was the original idea for me to start this panel. I became very interested in knowing Dee's story. I thought that she had just coached at the D3 level, but in getting to know her bio, I have found out that she has taught in high schools, or she has coached in high schools and at the Division I level. She did her undergrad at Bowling Green, was a basketball player there. Stephani Schmidt, a few years ago, when she first came to Otterbein, she was on a panel of women's coaches in a class of mine, and I heard her conversion story, as she mentioned it, that she had played a lot of different kinds of sports, but saw lacrosse and said, that's the sport for me, and started playing it only after she was in college. So I was really taken by that story. And then Josh Lambert, I talked to several of the head coaches at Otterbein trying to learn about a graduate assistant who is articulate and wise, et cetera, somebody who could tell our students about that route. So I think one of the things that I see is that the only route that was there for me when I was in college, the traditional route to teaching was you became a history major, you became a high school history or sociology teacher, and then also coach football. And now that is still a route that many students take, but it's not the only route. So I'd like to hear Josh tell us a little bit about how he came to know about applying for a graduate assistantship. So without anything more from me and my failing voice here, I'll turn it over to the panel, and we'll hear first from Josh Lambert.
All right, so as Dr. Gorman said, I'm Josh Lambert. I'm the graduate assistant men's lacrosse team. Graduate assistant, if you guys don't know, I'm actually in the master's program here at Otterbein. So while I'm coaching, I'm a full-time student. I take night classes. I'm here every day as a full-time coach. But my career path to getting here is what I would consider a traditional path to get here. I had 4 years of college playing experience. I had a great resume built by being a player. Like, I had great accolades of being a conference player of the year, having a chance to be an honorable mention All-American. So as I built my resume as a player, it looked really well for building a resume for coaching. So when I decided, actually To be honest with you, I didn't think I wanted to coach. I didn't think I wanted to be a GA after going to school for 4 years. I'm going to be honest with you. I was like, I want to get in the workforce and I want to do something. I had offers to be GA my senior year. I turned them all down. I didn't want to look at any of them. The second I graduated, I was like, I miss lacrosse. I miss everything that lacrosse offered to me. I had to start looking for a job again. I didn't want to enter the workforce because I was like, I don't want to be an adult. I want to do what was fun to me. So what is fun to me is playing lacrosse, being around lacrosse. So that's why I had to go back and start opening up my options again. Burn a couple bridges by saying no to being a GA at places that offered me to be a GA. So there is a website that is very friendly to lacrosse people and lacrosse coaches that has every job posting for high school and college levels. So as I started going through there, I started looking at GA spots, started sending my resume out, trying to find my perfect fit of where I thought would be a great place for me. Growing up here in Columbus, I knew absolutely nothing about Otterbein. I grew up 20 minutes from campus, never stepped foot on campus. So, just giving you a retrospect, I knew nothing about Otterbein. I applied to it because it was home for me. I went away to college, I played at Wheeling Jesuit. So, when I actually applied, I was like, this could be a fit. I want to go home, I want to be in Columbus. Upon choosing Otterbein, stepped on foot on campus and I kind of knew it was a fit. After meeting with Coach Hartnett, our head coach, I knew that this was a place I could see myself for 4 years. And met with a couple of the players, some of who I actually played with in high school, so that are still currently on the team. I talked to them about how the team is and how the coach was, and they told me that I would be a fit here for Otterbein. So my career path actually took a complete different change than what I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be out working in the business world. Now I'm here coaching lacrosse, and I couldn't be happier. So, like I said, I'm a graduate assistant. It's an evolving door. I'm going to actually be done here at Otterbein in May, and I'm currently looking for a new job right now. Well, in the process of looking for a coaching job. That's what I got.
I guess I can start with my story since, Dr. Gorman had mentioned it wasn't necessarily a traditional route, because even today I kind of sit here and say, how did I end up here? In high school I played every sport imaginable. I played soccer, basketball, ran track. I think I played every other sport through my youth as well. And when it came to going to college, I got recruited by some smaller schools for all of those sports, but I decided I wanted to go to the largest university in the country and not really worry about playing sports, and thought that was kind of going to be what I was going to do, just be a student at that point. So I went to Ohio State, and after about a year being there, I realized I had made a very tragic and terrible decision, because deep down I was an athlete and knew I needed to compete and knew I wanted to, be at practice every day and be around a team. So long story short, a friend of a friend transferred from another school, and at the time Ohio State didn't even have a lacrosse team either. This girl transferred her sophomore year, or it was both our sophomore year, and she had played lacrosse with the school that she had come from. And when she got to Ohio State, they did have a club team at the time, and so she had said, hey, I want to play club lacrosse, you want to play? And so I was like, oh, sounds cool, why not? I always wanted to play, and it sounded like, a good idea. So about a month in, fell in love, just really liked everything that was about the sport. I mean, I run track, so obviously running is a huge part of it. You could take a lot of different sports into lacrosse, and so I had a lot of the background experience necessary to do that. So really enjoyed playing. Was fortunate enough, even within my first probably 3 months of playing, they have a tournament during the year that is a club tournament for people who are college age and older, and you can play in different regions. Well, I tried out for the Midwest team and actually ended up making it within the first couple months of playing. So go to this tournament, and there is the U.S. team is playing Wales or Scotland or something there. So I just happened to sit down and say, hey, between games, I'm going to watch this and see what's going on. Well, watching these women play and how the game was, I just thought to myself, I need to be able to play like this. And so that kind of sealed it. And from that point, even as the next year it was still a club sport there, I really devoted a lot of time and energy to it because I loved to, and it was fun for me. Well, at the end of that year, they had announced that they were going to add it as a varsity sport at Ohio State, because in the early 90s they started kind of revisiting Title IX, and Ohio State needed to catch up. They had added soccer a year or two before, and then they decided they were going to add crew and women's lacrosse, which technically was going to be my senior year, but everybody has two at Ohio State, so I was good. I tried out again for that regional team in the summer, and the coach of that team actually ended up getting hired at Ohio State that following year. So when they finally announced who they were hiring as a coach, I was like, I know her, I can do this. So, walked in the first day and said, hey, remember me, you think I could play? And she said, absolutely. So matter of being at the right place at the right time and growing with the team and the program. So went through 2 years playing, and was going to go to graduate school. My actual life plan was to go and work in cardiac rehab. So even though my degree is in sports and exercise studies, it was really geared toward me going and helping people who had heart attacks and just any sort of medical issue related to their heart. And so as I was in grad school, I actually volunteer coached for 2 years with the team because my coaches were like, hey, as long as you're here, why don't you help us? And so I definitely wanted to stay involved. So, not only playing for 2 years, but saw the first 4 years of the program as it developed. And then after I graduated, was applying to jobs in hospitals, and the athletic department added a full-time position for another assistant at Ohio State, to which the head coach was like, hey, why don't you stay and coach? And I was like, never thought about it, but okay, yeah, I guess I could coach, because you don't want to leave and walk away. Well, after about 4.5 years of coaching, the head position opened at Denison, and I still had in my brain, I'm going to go work in a hospital somewhere. And the head coach at Ohio State was like, why don't you apply for that? And I was like, do you think? And she's like, well, don't you enjoy it, and don't you love it, and wouldn't you want this to be your job and to do this the rest of your life? And I had to stop and think about it, and was like, I guess you're right. So I applied and ended up working there for 10 years. And then actually when Otterbein started talking about adding, I had some friends that worked here, and I also actually live in Westerville. I could walk here pretty easily, probably faster than some of you, depending on what quad you live on. But part of the thing that really appealed to me was kind of bringing it all full circle, because as a person who entered college never playing lacrosse a day of their life and getting to watch a team that started and developed, I thought to myself, of all the firsts that were really cool as a player, that I wanted to be able to kind of bring back and do it here as well, and kind of start the program and give back the experience that I had had too. So that's sort of my start to where we are now.
My name is Dee Knoblauch, and I have a little bit of a different story. I grew up a sports nut. I'm a basketball fanatic. So Stephanie mentioned Title IX, and Title IX was huge. And huge in my life, because it was at that moment in time where they had to be fair, and they had to give scholarships to women athletes as well. So I was part of the first recruiting class ever at Bowling Green State University to give scholarships to women. So Title IX meant an awful lot to me personally. So at Bowling Green, I knew I wanted to be a coach. I knew I wanted to be a coach in high school. So I was a PE major at Bowling Green, health and athletic coaching minor. And I can remember, I think I still have it. I'm a bit of a pack rat. I still have a notebook of all the notes of drills that my coach would do at practice. Everything. Took a basketball coach from John Weinert, the longtime men's basketball coach at Bowling Green. Anyway, I always knew I wanted to be that. So, and I also was kind of strong-headed in that I had my ideas, so I wanted to be a head coach. So when I finished at Bowling Green, I was looking around. I wanted to be a head coach, so you got to start at, you have to pay your dues. So I applied to high school jobs all over the place, and I was fortunate to get a job at Lorraine Clearview. And I was the head girls basketball coach there. I also taught PE and health. So you often have to coach other things, particularly at the Division III level and in high school. So I was also the head girls volleyball coach. Had never played volleyball before except for just goofing around. And then I stayed there for 3 years. I knew I wanted to be a college coach, so I was looking around for a GA position. And I was trying to think of what words of wisdom I could share with you while you're going. You have to network, because I played at Bowling Green, and because I carried myself kind of respectfully. I wasn't, I didn't talk trash. I didn't do anything like that. So the other coaches knew me. So I was able to get a GA position at Eastern Michigan University, because the coach knew me because of my playing career. So again, you never know when doors are going to open up, so you always have to network. So I was there for 1 year. I got my master's degree, and I was the GA there, and then I was looking for, I wanted to be a head college coach, and again, I was very fortunate, got the job at Mount Union College in Alliance, Ohio, which is in the OAC, and again, coaching very many different things. So I was there for 11 years. I coached head women's basketball for all 11 years. My first 5 years, I was the head women's soccer coach. Never coached soccer before, just played it on a co-ed league, had to learn really, really fast. And then the last 6 years, I was also the head tennis coach. Now I had played tennis before and had taken tennis lessons, so that was a little bit better of a mix. And then I also taught there at Mount Union. From Mount Union, I went back to my alma mater, Bowling Green State University, and I was the head basketball coach there. I'm not a very good Division I recruiter, which is interesting because at Division III, you can't give you can't give scholarships. You can help them out with grant money and with the financial aid package, but you can't give scholarships. So here I was in a position at Bowling Green, I can actually give a scholarship. But the problem with Division I players, and this is my bias and my perspective, is that even with women's basketball, they have more people hanging around them because they're like big time, they're Division I players. So not only did I have to deal with or communicate and develop a relationship with the actual student athlete that I was recruiting, and the parents, which I always did at Mount Union very well, but now I had AAU coaches, I had high school coaches, I had friends, I'm not a very good schmoozer. So I wasn't a very good coach. So anyway, I retired from coaching in 2001. I always wanted to be a college professor. So I went to the Ohio State University, got my PhD in educational psychology, and then I was looking around for a job in Otterbein. I don't know how many of you are in education, but it is probably the preeminent education program in Central Ohio. Hands down. So I wanted to go to the best, and I was so fortunate. Again, timing is everything. It was so perfect. They needed a educational psychologist, and I got the job. And I've been here for 10 years, and it's great. And I've been enjoying watching all of the Otterbein sports teams. And I have 2 daughters, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I'm coaching them now in basketball and soccer. And it's quite different coaching a 6-year-old. Quite different. It's very fun than coaching college athletes. But anyway, that's what it's
All right, I guess I'll go with my story. I hope I keep you awake. First, my name is Peter Davila. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I have a little bit of a different path than everybody so far on this panel. So I hope you guys can kind of stay with me here. Coming from Miami, I got recruited to play football at Youngstown State University, but when I first got my offer letter from Youngstown State, I turned them down. At the time, the coach was Jim Tressel, former famous Ohio State coach. He wasn't famous back then. I turned him down because I wanted to go to Appalachia State. And in Boone, North Carolina, it was a great place, and I didn't want to come this far north because of the weather. And one recruiting story real quick, while I was in high school, I took a recruiting trip to University of Wisconsin. I fly out of Miami on a Friday afternoon. Back then, recruiting is different than it is now. You didn't talk to coaches till December and January, took your visits, and you committed in February. So I fly to Madison on a Friday afternoon. It was probably, when I got there, 15, 20 degrees. And I had a very thin coat. Coming from Miami, we didn't have weather that we needed to be concerned with in terms of having winter coats. So needless to say, it was a little cold for me. On Saturday morning, I decided that wasn't a place for me. So I called my mom, and there was no cell phones. We had beepers back then in 1993. We had a pager. So I paged my mom to where I was at and said, hey, I'm coming home. So I go to the airport, and when you're on a Division I recruiting trip, they give you what they call meal money. So the $40 meal money that they gave me on Friday, I turned that around to change my flight. Jump on a plane at 9:15 in the morning to go home to Miami. The one thing I forgot to do was tell the coaching staff at Wisconsin that I was leaving. So till approximately 2 or 3 in the afternoon, they were looking for me. They had no idea where I was at. They thought I was at a college party or had maybe too much fun the night before. But anyway, so I ended up going home, and I decided that being up north was not something I wanted to do. So I wanted to go to Boone, North Carolina. Well, it didn't work out for me there, so I ended up at a school in North Carolina by the name of Wingate College, now Wingate University. They were in the SAC 8 Division II school, and I was there as a 17-year-old because I graduated early. And after 1 year of being there, two things happened. One, it was too easy, no fun for me. And two, I was a young and dumb kid from Miami, and I got myself in a little bit of trouble. So with that, I decided to leave that school and decide, all right, well, I'm going to go to the guy that offered me a scholarship prior to me going where I first went. And I called Mark Snyder, who was the recruiting guy for the Florida area at the time, and he got me on the phone with Coach Tressel. Probably this was mid-June. Coach Tressel said, absolutely, we'd love to have you, but there's no scholarship for you. We offered you a scholarship, you turned it down. So as far as I'm concerned, I have no money for you. So if you'd like to come on your own, pay your own bill, and see what happens. So I bet on myself, and I took the chance. So I went to Youngstown State University as a walk-on athlete. I was a walk-on for the first 6 months, which we were on quarters. So for the first 2 quarters in 1994, I was a walk-on athlete there before I earned my full scholarship. Was fortunate enough to be a member of 2 national championship teams. It was a great experience. Got to meet President Clinton at the time. He invited us into the White House, into the East Wing, I believe it was, back in 1995. Graduated from there, decided that I want to coach. And I had happened to, networking is kind of the theme of this profession. There were some coaches in from Wofford College studying the way we did, the way we ran our defense, the way we did some different things because they wanted to learn. And I happened to sit down with those coaches and help explain the concepts that we ran at Youngstown State so they could utilize it in their program. I had mentioned to one coach, Nate Woody, that I wanted to possibly coach one day, and I was going to go home to Miami and go to my alma mater and coach down there, and he offered me a graduate assistant position. Now, this graduate assistant position at Wofford College at the time, they were just become a 1AA school, and there was no money. The only money I made that year was whatever I worked during camps in June. And I didn't have money to pay for an apartment. I didn't have basically money to eat. So what I did is I lived in an old, dingy locker room, a building that was probably twice as old as the Reich. If you've ever been to any of the locker rooms in there, that's what I lived in. I converted that into my own mini apartment. I had way too many sinks and toilets and showers than I needed, but it was just me in there, and it was good. And I did that for about a year. And I decided after that year, I wanted to make money. I wanted to go out into the world and use this education I received from Youngstown State University, and I wanted to go make money. I don't want to sit here and continue to pay my dues, because that's what you have to do in this profession. So I leave Wofford. I moved back to Youngstown, and I work in the business world. And while I was go back, I had my first daughter. I have a 14-year-old and 10-year-old. I had my first daughter, and I started working in the business world, everything from selling copiers, cell phones when they became popular, medical equipment, you name it, I've sold it. And I had a very good career in the sales profession. From title insurance is kind of where I made my mark for 7 or 8 years in the real estate business. And to move forward a little bit, approximately when my daughter was about 10 years old, I always tried to encourage my daughter, my kids, to go for whatever it is in life that you feel is important to you, and don't worry about money, because all that stuff will come to you. And my oldest, when she was 10 at the time, she looked at me and called me a liar, which was very unique to me. I wanted to get upset, but I figured let me hear the reasoning before I get upset. I didn't want to jump the gun on her. And she flat out told me, she said, "Daddy, you always tell me to live my dreams and to go after what I want, but you're not willing to do it." And I was coaching high school ball on the side and stuff in Cleveland at the time, and that was kind of the eye-opener for me. So at that point, I decided, you know what, I can't teach my daughter to do what she wants to do in life if I'm not willing to do it myself. So I quit my job. And I got a position at I got a position at Capital University as a linebacker coach. In 2011, I left a very good paying job for a $2,000 a year job. I put everything aside, used my savings, moved to Columbus, and decided I was gonna go for it because I didn't want to be a hypocrite to my child. 2011, I went to Capital. I coached there for a year. 2012, through networking, I was fortunate enough to come to Otterbein as a GA. Still haven't finished that master's degree, but we'll get to that. But I came to Otterbein as a graduate assistant, and it just so happened, again, being at the right place at the right time. Joe Nemeth got a full-time job with Asst University, which left a full-time position open on the staff. I guess I had done enough or something of quality that Coach Dept decided that I was worthy of a full-time position with healthcare benefits, which is huge in the coaching profession. And I'm going on year 3 as a full-time coach. As I've been growing my career, going back into coaching, and now I was a graduate assistant at the age of 36 years old. I'm 39 now. So as you see, he's what, 24? Almost. Okay. That's what most graduate assistants that go into this profession are, fresh out of school. I was 12 years removed from school, so I was in classes my first year here, 2012, with students like yourself. So it was a little difficult for me being a 36-year-old man being in classes with 18, 19-year-olds. I gotta admit, I have nothing in common with you guys. I don't. But as I've continued to grow my career as being a full-time coach here, I want to perfect what I do for my athletes. So what I've done, I've been fortunate enough to get 2 minority internships in the NFL the past 2 summers. I was with the Minnesota Vikings in 2013 for training camp. I was there for 3 weeks. And this past summer, I was with the Houston Texans, summer of 2014 for training camp. And I'm going there to network. That's one thing that's very good that you have to do in this profession, but B, I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to be a sponge. Everything I do, there has to be a reason behind it. Everything I do, there has to be a lesson to be learned, whether it's good or bad. That's one thing I try and teach my athletes. One thing that I have that's a nightmare for me, and truly during the season, and some of the players are in here, I can be a little ornery during the season, and I'm okay with that. My nightmare is that I haven't done everything that I can possibly do to prepare my athlete for their game on Saturday. That's what keeps me up at night. That's why I work as hard as I do. The coaching profession for me is, there's one thing I can probably say and leave out there for you guys, is as you move into coaching, nursing, education, whatever the case is in the world, if you're doing it for money, you're going to regret it. And last time I checked, when somebody knows something else, you're on this world once. Okay, so whatever you do for your life, do it because it's something you love. The money will come if it's meant to be. Do not do it for money. I made that mistake. So there's one piece of advice I'll give you there. Do not do it for money, because no matter how much money you have, no matter if you make $150,000, $200,000 a year, if you're not in love with what you're doing, you're going to be miserable. And here I sit today. There's my story.
Dee, one follow-up question, and then we can go to the second part. So you got up to Division I and then thought you could not go back or sideways?
It was kind of funny. I really wanted to be,
In the classroom?
growing up, no, I really wanted to be a coach, but I remember when I was saying I was a young coach, that I only wanted to coach for so long. My mom was a teacher. I only wanted to coach for so long, and I wanted to make sure, because I love to play, and it gets to the point where you're too old, and I couldn't hang with the players in practice, and I'm getting beat, and looking bad, and, I'm like, I think it's time to do something else. And I've always loved school, so it was a no-brainer, really.
Is coaching a good training ground for educational psychology?
Oh, yes.
Leading question.
Oh, yes. Oh, it's so great. I mean, Ed Psych is just such a great class. It's all about teaching and learning and motivation. I tell so many, I tell stories about my daughters in my Ed Psych class, and then I tell coaching stories. It's just, coaching is a microcosm of life. and Ed Psych really explains so much. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Let me ask a question then about healthcare. Pete mentioned it. What about that, and especially women in your career, you're both mothers, is coaching a good career to also combine American and African?
I think you need to marry the right person.
All right.
Of all the friends that I have that are coaches, I mean, we all have very similar supportive husbands that understand the fact that I'm not sitting at home with an apron and the house isn't always going to be clean and we're not going to have a hot meal and it's called you're going to take care of that yourself, and when I roll in after our game, then you're going to be serving me a meal every once in a while. It's just, you definitely have a little bit of a difference in the role, and somebody's got to understand that, because there are, I don't want to say like stereotypical expectations that some men may have of the role their wife is going to play, but they just need to understand it's going to be different. And, you know, even now, it's obviously a new challenge, and if you didn't have kids when you were, you know, I'm learning quickly with the 6-month-old the difference of what my life was and how I could stay late at practice, or I could stay late to watch video, or I could stay to do some other things in recruiting even, and spend a little extra time doing that, that suddenly it's not just about me and what I need to get done, it's how I have to balance that with everybody else. And I don't think a male coach would have as much of an issue to it if you have, you know, a supportive wife at home as well. So I think it goes both ways. You have to have the right spouse to be a
I would
coach and
say
be able to be
that's
successful.
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
At the time when I made the decision to go back into coaching and leave the business room, again, leave a very good job, the woman who's now my wife, who I was dating at the time, she looked me in the eye and said, we'll figure out a way to make it happen. Don't worry about it. And I think that's probably the moment for me to where I said, you know what, this is a woman I cannot lose. And what she's done for my family, you know, in terms of holding it together through everything that we do, coaching from, you know, usually I'm here during season 5:30 in the morning, and I probably won't get home till 7:30, 8 o'clock, and that's on a good night. You know, to deal with my girls and to, you know, my girls are at the age of 14 and 10 to where their, how do I say this? Personalities are really starting to show. So then she has to deal with that and some of the mood swings that go on in the house that I can't be there for. So it's absolutely about marrying the correct person.
Well, and you mentioned the time wise. You need to realize if you're going to go into coaching that the time commitment is astronomical. I mean, it's amazing, and you would think, well, Division III, it's not like that. Oh, it is. Yes, I would imagine that Division I, and particularly Division I football, men's basketball, and women's basketball is the worst. But Division III coaches, you're always recruiting. You always have to talk to a kid or a parent. You got to go to a game. You got to watch game film. You need to be totally dedicated to being a coach, because the time, I mean, you better love it.
It's not 9 to 5 in any way, shape, or
So
form.
as a CA, Josh, you have health care as a student, the same as you did when undergrad.
Yeah, currently, because I'm 23 years old, I'm still on my parents' insurance, which I mean, it's not a huge deal. I'm a single male. I don't have a girlfriend. I got a dog. I mean, having healthcare insurance really isn't that big of a deal for me if I have it or not right now in my stage in life, because, like I said, I'm by myself. I'm a single male. So if I was like entering the coaching world right now, health insurance wouldn't be one of my top priorities if I was looking for a full-time assistant job, because, like I said, it's just me. If I had a fiance and or a girlfriend or a wife, that'd definitely be a different change in my tone, which you can tell by these people that it is definitely important to have health care insurance as you move on in life. But for me right now, it's not important. But yes, I'm on my parents.
Well, maybe Dee, you can help me with this. Teaching is a pretty demanding position at our profession. You get close to students, you have to grade students. You don't grade students. What's the up and the down to coaching? I mean, you know, why do you do it? And on the other hand, what are the challenges?
That's a great question, and it's in the joy part. The greatest thing for me, and I think for most coaches, I would imagine, is to get to know your players and to see a player grow over 4 years and to become not just, you know, a really good player, but a better person, more mature, better decisions, you know, I mean, that was just an absolute thrill. So the biggest joy for me for coaching was definitely getting to know my players. And as a coach, you get to spend so much more time. I mean, you have this huge group goal in front of you, right? You're working towards this. You're together 6 months out of the year. So you really get to know your players. So that was a wonderful thing. And that's, to me, the bummer about teaching. So when I teach, my ed psych class, we'll meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I get to know the players, but I don't really get to, or the students, but I don't get to know them as people. And I don't, I kind of see their career path for 4 years, because I'll see them, in the sophomore in ed psych, and then I'll see them student teaching, and I might have a seminar, but there isn't the closeness at all between a player and a coach, just because of the time investment and because of the common goal. That for me was the most significant joy of coaching. It's wonderful.
Anyone else what's the upside to this?
Well, again, coming from the business world, it's about, basically what Dee said, seeing an athlete come in as a freshman, most of the football players in this room are freshmen, to watch them grow over 3 years, to see some of the trials and tribulations they're going to go through and hopefully help them through that and mentor them, to know that kind of the pay it forward theory, which is probably one of the biggest reasons why I decided to go into coaching, not, coming from a single family household in Miami, mom working 2 jobs and that whole cliche story that everybody has. I was fortunate enough to have coaches in my life that gave a damn. And I'll say it that frank because that's exactly what they did for me. Made sure that I wasn't on the streets of Miami and the gangs and the drugs, which back in the mid-'80s and early '90s is very easy to do. I had coaches that, dropped me off at home, picked me up after school, took me to practice, made sure I had food, and some of that stuff, and I'm indebted to those men for the rest of my life. And so, to me, kind of the pay it forward process and making sure that, if I could help my players in any way, make sure that once they leave college that they're prepared to be, great people in the community, great husbands, great fathers. That's a joy I get. Just to give you an example, just this past weekend, a kid I coached at Capital University, he's graduated, he's off in the business world being a nurse in Rootstown. He bought his first house, and he called me to let me know how excited he was and sent me all these pictures of this house. I think it's a rundown shack, but he bought his first house, and that was a major accomplishment for him. That's some of the joy that I get out of it.
For me, probably the most rewarding thing is being just able to get back to the sport that has given me so much. It's given me a chance to get college education because I got to play at Division II level. I got a scholarship to play, and I also, now I'm in the coaching world doing what I want and love in life, but I've been able to get back to the younger groups. Like this summer, I was able to coach an 8th grade team for 4 weeks. I got to spend time with some of the youngest players and develop their skills to a level that they probably never had coaching, coming from a dad who's probably never played the sport of lacrosse because our sport is still relatively new and growing. So for me to be able to give back to the younger generation, especially here in Columbus, that is almost a hotbed now for lacrosse, it's awesome that I can see these kids right now that I've made strong bonds with because they actually are still emailing me just saying, hey coach, what's up? Like nothing big, they just want to always be talking to me. They're still like, hey, we have a tournament coming up, can you come watch me? Like being able just to know that I made an impact on a 12-year-old's life is a big deal to me because I'm 23 and I know that the impacts that coaches had on me as a youth are the reason probably why I'm sitting up here and coaching right now.
I think through experiencing coaching, especially right after college, and then seeing people who go on to coach that you at one time coached yourself, formed some really cool relationships and bonds that I think have really, stuck with me because I think I'm very close to several of my players who I coached as an assistant coach when I was at Ohio State, who are probably my closest friends in the coaching world now that are head coaches and pretty successful at what they do, and just getting that opportunity to kind of share your life and everything that you've done through that period. It's been a long time now, but at the same time, I think looking at how randomly it all came to me in terms of being in the sport and just getting an opportunity to coach in the first place. And if you really look at how very few people go from high school to actually play in college, and then how few of those people who get the opportunity to continue coaching, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And yeah, no matter what job you do, you're gonna have great days and you're gonna have days that you want to shoot yourself. But depending on what you're doing day to day, and you can kind of look and enjoy and appreciate every moment, because not everybody could do what we do every day. then not everybody can do it for a long time either, and you find that out too, because there are a lot of people who try to coach and it's just not what you think, and it takes a certain like mental fortitude to year in and year out, especially if you have good years, you have bad years, and you have to take it all, and you have to take the time away from your family and your friends and the things you miss, and you miss weddings and you miss anything else, and I just tell my friends, if you get married in the month of March, don't expect me to ever be there, you know, and they came to accept that, and you know, there's sacrifice you're going to make, but at the same time, when the sun is shining and it's a beautiful day and you're out in the field and you're doing what you love to play and you're passing on knowledge and skills and helping somebody get better at something you love that you're passionate about, I can't think of any other way I could do that with my life every day.
You know, I hear from these students, well, at least 3 times a week, that their favorite mode of learning is to listen. So you guys have been listening. You guys are also very, you're great listeners, but you're very smart and attentive. Questions, you guys. What kinds of questions do you have for these coaches? This is it. This is the...
This is for everybody. How do you guys handle highs? Like when you have a really good season, everybody's, you know, rubbing your butt and telling you that you did a good job. And how do you handle, okay. You know, they're the same scenario. All right, and then how do you handle your lows where everyone is, you know, looking at you and you're supposed to come up with the answer to questions that you don't necessarily know the answer to? How do you handle those highs?
Great question. He's not even in the class. I know. Very good. Great question.
Well, I think...
Go ahead.
I think one, over time, you kind of learn, especially like, my first year coaching, I took over a team as a head coach. That was a great team. So we went in, we won the conference with the NCAA tournament, and it was like, this is awesome, you know? So it's easy to do that sometimes when you're put in the right position. But, you know, you have to learn to develop, you know, an understanding. It's hard to be good in football and, you know, or lacrosse or any other sport, and it's hard to do it year after year. I think playing on a team like Youngstown State, you know, they're very good and been strong for years. Your Mountain Union's good year after year. I don't think people really have the understanding of how hard it is to do that. And once you start coaching, you have to realize very quickly that it's a dime a dozen that has the ability to do it. Would we love to? Oh, yes. And so you have to be able to take some perspective, because I think it's important to pass on to your players that sort of ideal and attitude as well, because you don't want to set them up for these mass disappointments if you don't win the conference or the national championship every single year, because they're going to reflect that on themselves. You have to teach them how to not necessarily do the best every time. That's life. You're not going to always do everything perfect and succeed, and it's going to help you pass that down, you know, as they go on to do other things. The majority of them are not going to go on to coach or play professional lacrosse, definitely not for the women's team, you know. The lows is harder too, because you have to be able to have a little ability to self-reflect and say, hey, maybe I did something wrong. What can I do better? And not necessarily, I think sometimes people will be like, there can be excuses and there can be reasons and there can be other people's faults for things that went wrong. But I know for me personally as a coach, I will always stop and say, what did I do? Where do I got to turn this around? Where do I have to start over again? And make sure that this does not happen again. And it's a learning process, and you've got to coach a long time to start developing a good pattern of how to really not over-celebrate, because I've seen coaches who are like, hey, we did this and beat this team and we're the greatest team, and it spirals quickly because all of a sudden you're no longer that great team because you're worried about what you did 3 years ago. And it changes too fast, especially in the game of lacrosse. Our rules change every 5 minutes. So if you worry about something, what you did in one game that won, you're going to get beat in the next year. So it's about really reflecting often and, really understanding that high is great, but you got to get back to it. And low is great, right the ship, and you got to get back to it as well.
I could add to that in saying, got to put it on perspective in terms of, me as a person and as a coach, when I try and teach my players, I'm never satisfied, regardless of how good we do or how bad we do. When I was playing football and I guess learning the ins and outs of the X's and O's, the one thing that always came to mind that was told to us is you get as your work deserves. So if you play very bad and you lose, then you've earned your loss. What happened during that week while you didn't prepare If you win, again, put it in perspective, what happened during that week on why you won. And there has to be a certain amount of humility that goes into it, win or lose, just because, you know, you're not always going to win everything. You know, I think Dee said it, that athletics is a microcosm of life. In this world that you're going to, or in this life you're going to live, you're not always going to be perfect. You're not always going to have everything that goes great. There's going to be days to where, you know, you want to crash your car into something, but again, you got to put it into perspective. How can I get better? How can I improve my current situation? So that's why I think for me, athletics, with dealing with the highs, you got to put it in perspective. Have you earned that right? Have you put in the work, or were you just lucky? Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. For the lows, what have you done incorrectly? What do you need to change to make sure that you're not at that place again? So you get as your works deserves. And you might outlook on it.
Yeah.
I'll just add one little thing, and this is the thing. When I first started at Mount Union, we weren't very good, and we didn't have the talent to compete. So, you know, we won 7 games my first year. So, you know, how can I keep the team working hard? So what I started doing is, when I would do the film breakdown, I would count basically three things. I would count hustle plays, where if they dove or took a charge or whatever, it'd be a hustle play. I counted mental errors, because you can make a physical error, but mental errors, we have to know where we need to be in a play and whatnot. And then I would compile these things, and I would also take a look at our stats for the particular game. So Capital used to be great when Dixie Jeffers is still there, the coach, and we used to get pounded by, once we lost by 40 points. So how can I mean, that was low. So how can we take a look at that, and well, what do we do? So, you know, you just break it down, and what are the short-term goals? How do we do on rebounding? How did we do on our short-term goals on there? Did we put in the effort? Did we cut down our mental errors? So I cut it down to these little specific goals, because we just weren't going to beat a lot of teams. But did we reach our goals? And we just kept getting better and better. So that's what you have to do when you're in the middle of a losing season. What can you step back and you look at, what are you doing right? And let's continue to do that, and target what you're doing wrong and see how you can fix it. That's how it worked.
And then, me being the youngest coach on the panel, I have 1 year of experience. My first year was awesome. We made the NCAA tournament, so we were on the highest of highs as a team. But during that season, we had some pretty low points. We lost a couple 1-goal games that there was no means that we should have lost. There's point in time that our seniors thought that they were not going to be in the NCAA tournament because we lost a 1-goal game. But because of how we looked at it as a coaching staff, it's always the next game. We got to put behind what we did wrong there. Let's learn from that. Let's move on. So as a coaching staff, we were always looking for that next game, building towards our goal, never getting out of sight of what our goal was. And we actually ended up making our goal and having a great season. And then this year, we're not that same team, is what I've learned. We're not the same team that made the NCAA tournament. We graduated seniors. We have a new freshman who are sitting here in this room tonight with me. So we're a different team, but we have the same goal, and our expectations are to build on our goals every year. So yeah, we've had great success, but we got to now sustain our success. So as a coaching staff, we got to have a mentality that we're still trying to get better every day.